Sure. So my journey in building the mentor method wasn't the most traditional. My background's in graphic design. I majored in graphic design in undergrad and entered into the workforce 2009 as a graphic designer for a top 10 defense contracting company. And so the bulk of my career was in graphic design. However, being in corporate America, working for some of the largest companies in the world, I always signed up for corporate mentorship programs to help me evolve and advance in my career. Yet every time I signed up for a corporate mentorship program, I was always matched to the only other underrepresented person that was available. And when I realized that that was the basis of matching, whether it was matching me to another woman or person of color, I knew that more should be included in that mentorship process. And so fast forward later on in my career, when I was a manager at PwC and had my own team that wanted a robust mentorship program, I knew that it was my responsibility as a team leader to implement something that was scalable, measurable, and impactful, and wouldn't repeat the same problems of demographic-based matching, since you need more than that to build a real mentor relationship. So looked online for a tool that would help me do that quickly, didn't see anything. And so that's when I used my background in product graphic design and web design to build the first iteration of the mentor method, and then couldn't stop thinking about it. There was just something about it where I was like, let's just explore this. I ran the idea by my sister, my older sister. She's always been my sounding board. And I ran the idea by her, and her advice was just let the world tell you no. And I took that and just quietly worked on it nights and weekends, didn't make a huge announcement about it or anything like that. And here we are. A lot of extra steps along that journey that I'm sure we'll get into, but that is the Sparks Notes version for the first question.
I love that. In terms of, I throughout my own career, I've had tons of people say, well, you just have to find a mentor. And,
Yeah,
it's not like you just go out and hold a sign, who wants to be my mentor, on the street.
Right, exactly. It's so hard to find the right mentors. And when you're looking at it based on titles or demographics, that's really not what you need. What you need is that simpatico, that ethos alignment where, similar to, any of your close friends or classmates that turn into friends or coworkers that turn into friends, there's that chemistry and something about them that makes you feel like you can trust them. And your mentor should have that same attribute. But if you're just going based off of someone's LinkedIn titling, more often than not, it's not a successful match.
100%. And it's really the chemistry between, you and a person that respect, helps to build that mentorship relationship, certainly over time. As an entrepreneur, tell me a little bit about, it's never an easy journey. And I can't imagine going out and doing the raises and the funding and the things that you've done. What's really been the most rewarding part of it for you?
The lives that we're changing. That's really been the most rewarding thing. The fact that we're seeing people get promoted faster, we're seeing people get matched to the right mentors, being able to open up their aperture for what's possible in their careers so that they don't feel like they're stuck in a job, but really can build the career that they want to get into is the most rewarding thing out of this entire process. And the other piece is just really learning more about who I am. As a woman business owner, as an entrepreneur, period. It's been a really incredible journey of just discovering, different strengths and different, areas where we do need team support and otherwise. So this entire journey it's been a trip for sure.
Well, I can, in thinking about along that journey, you have had to have developed some superpowers. What are those that you think you have, and some are the ways in which you kind of developed and nurtured them?
That's a great question. I'm really grateful for the mentors that I've had throughout this entrepreneurship journey because they've pointed out blind spots and areas of improvement. And they've also made great efforts to ensure that I know what my strengths are so that I can capitalize on those. So I think some of the superpowers I have are empathy, being able to understand where our team, customers, investors are all coming from. the ability to communicate effectively, and then also think strategically and think quickly about, this thing is happening. How do we solve for it in the next hour? And being able to adapt through that level of resiliency. Grateful for all of it.
Resiliency, I think, is the word of the past 2 years, along with
Yeah,
pivot, because everybody's had to develop a sense of that resiliency. And
absolutely.
it's not always easy to do that. And as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you've heard, I love that your sister said, let the world tell you no, because you probably do hear a lot of people giving you really nice pats on the back, but at the same time, you want that, putting yourself out there in a vulnerable way that really kind of opens the door to seeing what's possible, within there. Talk a little bit more about how, who has been some of your inspirations,
Mm.
and gotten you through many of those more challenging times.
My mom, when she was here, biggest supporter, right? My family, they don't always understand what I'm doing, but they're still really supportive and looking out for me. I have a really great network of close friends here in Austin that are other founders and business owners, so they understand, if we have plans and then suddenly I have to cancel because there's something that's come up with the business. And that's been really great, being able to have people that understand, can relate, and can empathize. I have incredible mentors, as I mentioned before, just really incredible people that aren't all women, right? Some of my mentors, come from very diverse backgrounds, and they've all been able to share their gifts with me to inspire and motivate me to be the best possible version of myself, solve challenging problems, and just continue growing.
I love that you say to be the best possible version of yourself. And the inspirations, almost everybody says that their parents are truly that source and that inspiration. And you need that foundation, of kind of the lessons that you've learned from them, and the sometimes even examples from them. We talk an awful lot at Texas State really about an entrepreneurial mindset. What is that? What would the mindset of an entrepreneur look like to you? And do you think you have one? And if you do, where did you get it from?
That's an interesting question. And I've been asked it before. That's a hard one. I think it depends on the definition of an entrepreneurial mindset. To me, it's just, having this idea, knowing that there's a sizable market, and trusting that the solution that my team and I have built is the one that'll make it, across the finish line. It's really more having that faith, and also having an incredible team behind you. Can't do this without them. Always grateful for them. So I think some key attributes for a strong entrepreneur, I even hate that phrasing, like a strong entrepreneur, but I think the attributes that contribute to surviving the entrepreneurial landscape, right? We talked about resiliency already. We talked about empathy. I think that's really important. Also, the ability to discern what's critical and what's just a fleeting issue, conversation, what have you, so that you're able to optimize and prioritize for what's really necessary. The ability to ask for help and make sure that you have the right people around you. And then the last piece is just the ability to really understand when something is bigger than you and needing to either assess, get help, and just modify from there. But if you ask, anyone else on this webinar, other people might have different opinions and different definitions of what that entrepreneurial mindset means. But that's what it means for me.
That's one of the reasons why we ask the question, because I think it does mean something different for everybody. And, some people go back to, where did that spark come from? Oh, well, I was always an entrepreneur. I had a lemonade stand and sold t-shirts.
Well, I definitely had that too. My dad talks about how when I was 5, I came to him one day and was like, I understand that you want me to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack. I want money for Barbies. So, and like essentially negotiated so that it was only like a week long thing, but he was like, let's go with it. I basically pitched him to get $1 for every meal that I ate.
That's fantastic.
And my mom was like, absolutely not. My dad was like, let's just hear her out and see what this was. And like they still have he showed me like my little invoices that I wrote, like, in crayon or pencil or whatever, I ate this for breakfast, had this for lunch, therefore it wasn't even $3, it was like 3 monies, like something absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I think I've always had that willingness to negotiate and seeing a problem that somebody wants to solve and figuring out how to monetize it. Around the dinner table growing up, we always ate dinner as a family. So, I remember even through high school, one of our family activities was like, a highlight of your day, low point or whatever. But then we'd also sometimes play a game of like, what is a problem that you're seeing and how could you solve it in a way that could be a viable business? But I mean, to me, it was just fun, right? Like I love ideating and going through that process. I didn't think of it as building that entrepreneurial mindset, but now very grateful that, those were the games and that my parents entertained that ridiculous pitch of getting paid money to eat a snack for a week. But
That's a new one that I've not heard yet, but
yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
commend you on your negotiating skills and your creativity on that one.
thank you.
And I think that that's a fantastic thing for parents to be able to do and kind of make it as a game where it is about, finding problems, creating solutions, and that is the basis behind an entrepreneur within there. So I want to revisit the negotiating skills because I'm sure that those have come in handy as you have gone through venture capital raise and starting your business. It's also something that I see that an awful lot of women are not necessarily inherently good at and need to build those skills more over time. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to negotiating and where you think, you clearly had it as a child, so you were just good from the get-go on it?
Well, I think it's not a matter of women not being good at it. I think the systems and the key shareholders in the world have instituted this level of shame on women that speak their mind and ask for what they deserve. So women are strong problem solvers. Businesses that are women led have greater returns and investors are seeing that, which is great. So I would almost modify the question in
Okay.
terms of like, how can women just get more comfortable
Yes.
owning the fact that we're strong negotiators, and how do we limit those limiting beliefs, and how do we push back on systems that have told us that we have to be nice, we have to go with the flow and all of these other pieces, when in reality we don't have to do that, right? To answer that question on how women can modify that, I took a negotiation class through when I was doing my graduate studies at Harvard. There was a negotiation class that was amazing. So having to practice for an entire semester negotiating random situations that weren't taking place, those mock negotiations was really helpful, but I took those seriously and used them on, a routine basis. I think also having worked in corporate America and having worked in management consulting for 4 years, you really learn how to speak to people. I think sometimes people believe that a negotiation is some intense thing where, you have a witty comeback and you're, strategizing and haha, I got you. And that's not actually the case. Oftentimes it's really just listening to what the other person has to say, understanding what's important to them, and finding what you can do together so that both needs are accomplished. Having that bargaining range that what you'll walk away from if you need to, that's really it. But I think the core of it really goes back to making sure that our allies and those that are in a position to amplify women that do negotiate and push back celebrate that versus trying to shame it the way that we're kind of told from Disney movies on is not what we're supposed to do.
that it's not the polite thing to do, or the, ladies don't behave that way problem.
Right.
I
I
100% agree with you.
100% agree with that. Disagree
Yes.
with that. Like, it's just such an issue.
I agree. I loved also that you mentioned and you talked about women-led companies having higher returns, and that goes to a core of women tend to be good problem solvers and leaders, but also to having very diverse teams. And from a woman in STEM and graphic design, I'm sure you have, back in your corporate life, been the only woman in a room at times. I know that often happens around a boardroom or a conference room. Talk a little bit about, how mentoring really helps to develop those more diverse teams, and ensure that the team members that are there are valued and appreciated for the things that they can bring to the table.
My mentors really helped me understand that in business, you're going to run into multiple personalities, and it's less about the personality on the other side, but how mentally you're prepared to manage those multiple personalities that you run up against. And how do you make sure that you're actually listening to that person and you're still staying within your own self-integrity to make sure that you're addressing whatever needs to get done, or you're, going back to that negotiation point before. In terms of building a diverse team, for me, it was just a natural. I'm first generation American from the Congo. Growing up in the DC metro area, it's so diverse. You get, it's like this crock pot of multiple cultures, and it's not, it's just sort of the norm, unexpected. So for me, having the gift of, growing up in that environment, it's not something that we had to be aggressive about in terms of building the team. It was just something that naturally gravitated because we are, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the mentor method. It's upfront on our values. I talk about it all the time. So you automatically weed out those that aren't in alignment with that value system. What I would really say is more important is making sure that you have a team that has the same values that you do. Because when things get hard and the rubber hits the road, you need to know that you have a team that has your back. And the best way to at least get that started is to make sure that you have those same core values. Mine personally are trust, honesty, communication, and efficiency. And so even when we're doing the first, 15-minute screening conversation, it's less about the skill set at that point, because we'll get there. It's really more about, like, how do you view the world? Why do you think this is important? Where have you been? Where are you going? To make sure that we do have that core alignment on, what's important and what really matters. And then, of course, we get into the skills review and everything else after that. But I would say that's more important to start. And if you end up in a very homogenous space, even I have to worry about that, right? Making sure that we don't have a team of all one demographic. It's important to just start hiring from different sources and being intentional and saying, okay, we got this team from this source. What if we try going to these non-traditional spaces like boot camps and otherwise to make sure that we're getting a good mix of experiences and people from all walks of life?
I love that you say that. And I think that's a message that our students really need to hear, in terms of a lot of them, as soon as, the first thing they want when they graduate is they're going to be out trying to find a job. And, looking at it from an employer point of view, that it wasn't the technical skills that are the first thing that get you noticed, or are part of the interview process.
Well,
Those
have
soft
those
skills. Sure, you have to have those, but also it's those soft skills. Yeah, that definitely are critical, are just as critical, and sometimes even more, because we often hear an awful lot about, how they're the skills you come to the job with, and then there are the ones that you develop while you're actually working the job.
Exactly.
The soft skills become a pretty dominant factor. Talk a little bit about how you have built your teams, in terms of the types of people I mean, you talk about your values and where you've sourced people from, but that gel that brings everybody together, and how you decided or how you determined what your leadership style in being able to develop those teams and lead those teams.
My leadership style has evolved as the business has evolved, because you get a new set of things to work on. 6 months ago, it was me and Joseph Kopser, my chief growth officer, our advisors, and now we have a team of 13 people, excluding our offshore team. So, the things that we were tackling early on are just completely different. We have team members to address those. I'm now on a new set of amazing opportunities and challenges and things that, are now in my swim lane. But in terms of, your question was around mentors helping navigate that?
Sure.
Okay. I think for me, it's remembering a year ago, 2 years ago, when, even years before that, when I first started the mentor method and, several years ago, I would have killed to be this busy. I would have killed to have the things that are on my plate. I would have never believed that, we were going to get to this point. So for me, it's just remembering where I come from. As a first generation American woman from the Congo, I recognize that I'm really the first generation of women to have full opportunity to just run 1,000 miles an hour in any direction and have these goals and not apologize for it, and really course correct some of the traditional norms that were put on generations of women before me, right? So when we're thinking about growing the company and all of the things that we're tackling now and the new problems that we're facing, because I have that like on the back of my mind every single day, and that's sort of the bigger why behind this, I don't really have the best answer for that, because it's like, this comes with the territory. We're now seed stage. We have this round of funding. Maybe 2 months ago, a month or two ago, Google came in as an investor, and you just continue growing the company and adapting, which is really what entrepreneurship is about. I know that's probably not a satisfactory answer, but
perfect. That's perfect. I love it when kind of the answer to that evolves even in itself, in terms of you have to keep evolving. What you were doing last year, what you were doing 5 years ago is never going to be the same as what you're doing today. And it is a constant evolution and learning process, and development of yourself and your business, your skills, and you as a person.
Yes. And I remember my first job at this defense contracting company, the head of communications, I remember him saying to me once, like, what got you here won't get you there. And that has stuck with me since 2009. Like, I can't not think about that. And so for me, on the evolution topic, it's always thinking about like, okay, I got here through this skill set. I want to get to this next level or accomplish these next 3 goals. What do I need to do to get there? And what skills have I learned already that'll help me sort of build the pathway to get there? But what else do I need to do to make sure that I'm really on the right track?
I like that, because your history doesn't predict where you're going in the future. You can't rely on that just because it got you to this point. You're going to need a new set of skills to get you to the next. Well, I will also, we're kind of coming up close, but I'm going to say for those of you who are on the call, please go ahead and start putting in some questions for Janice into the chat, typing them in, and I will go ahead and ask and moderate the Q&A, but please go ahead and start doing so. What do you wish you had known when you got out of school that you know now? What kind of piece of advice would have been the best to have received?
Well, I think about Janice at 21. I mean, night and day, like completely different person, quite honestly. Completely different person. So I guess that would be the piece that you're going to change, especially in your 20s. I'm 34 now, still evolving, but like that 22 to 30 time frame of your life, I mean, you are just the metamorphosis. You are changing. You're learning so much about yourself, the real world, your relation to the real world and yourself. Like so much can take place in that time frame that you really want to just be open to it. Like you may think that you have a life direction, do what you can to work towards that. But if you really start seeing that you're being called to a different direction, take that too. I think that's probably the biggest one. I would also tell myself to invest in really good mental health resources, because getting locked in here means that you can win almost anything. Like it's a mental game in entrepreneurship for sure. And so I'm grateful that, even when I was entry level, I would find, therapists that would work with my budget, which was very small at the time. And I now have, amazing therapists that have been with me for several years. But having that mental health foundation is really critical to being able to do anything else in life, whether you create a business or not.
I almost hear that you train for it like an athlete, both on the mental health side of things and the practice every day. So you're an entrepreneurial athlete, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I was a theater and band geek, so I don't know, but back in the day, but yeah, I mean, it is mental training constantly. Like, I think sometimes people think about, what is it doing to your body or, some other aspects, but like really making sure that your head is on right so that you're, ready for battle when it's time to battle, and you're ready to, hear your team's concerns, and you don't have any ego around that, so that you can be the best CEO possible, or, making sure that you're still taking time to talk to your family, because that's something that's important to me and helps me feel grounded. Just being able to build that self-awareness, and the self-assuredness to know, how to pull different levers when I need them is really important. And mental health and therapy is like the best way to really get to that core and dig into whatever you need in order to really stay locked in mentally.
100%. Well, we've got some wonderful questions that are coming in through the chat. Lila is asking, is it hard to get into entrepreneurship starting from something artistic like graphic design instead of starting with something like business, marketing, etc.? And really, wants to know, how do you get the knowledge that you didn't get in college?
So continue taking classes. I studied entrepreneurship from MIT, strategic management from Harvard, all online. So you're able, I mean, it was like still semesters and all those pieces, right? And you're still in a class, but just because you graduated doesn't mean you can't continue to learn. So continue evolving your skill set. Think about the type of leader you want to be and where you want to go in your career. And even if you're still too early to get that, having that foundational knowledge will be very helpful. When I studied entrepreneurship from MIT, I had no idea I was ever going to have my own company. I just knew that as a graphic designer, I would become indispensable if I could understand the business side of the world and the creative side. I needed to make sure I had both sides of my brain. Again, mental. Here, I guess that's the theme. But I wanted to make sure that I had both sides of my brain really understanding the business world, so that if I did want to transition into, say, program management or, another pathway in the future, I had the flexibility to do that, and I wasn't just put in a box. But to answer your question, Leela, and thank you for asking, being artistic and being a graphic designer, especially in corporate America, gave me a very tough skin. I can take a lot of feedback. I can hear a lot of no's when your client is a managing director that wants to get a proposal out the door in 8 hours, and you have to figure out how to get it done, how to push back on somebody that has 20 plus years experience. You really learn a lot of transferable skills that will then help you in your business. But as a graphic designer and as a creative, you have to understand how to manage your own product, projects, how to, take care of yourself, how to solve these problems creatively. People will tell you they want one thing, but in reality, if you dig a little bit deeper and you know how to ask the right questions, you realize that this is what they're actually trying to solve. And that's what you do every day as an entrepreneur. There isn't a day that I'm not doing that. So great questions.
Oh, that's fantastic advice as well in terms of empathy and looking at it from another point of view,
Yeah.
and what others are needing out of the product or the situation. Our next question is coming in from Carolina. She says she can clearly see that you're an incredibly successful woman, and she asks, how did you mentally break the mindset of being a Black woman so that you could get where you are now? Or did you have to?
Didn't have to. Black women are incredible. We move mountains and we just continue to do it. Next question.
Love it. Great advice all around. We have Nadine agrees that mental health is important and easily overlooked. You said that you found particular help and assistance throughout the way. Have you also used business coaching, or is it typically been more of, like you say, mentors rather than somebody who is a coach or a therapist like that?
Yep. Jeannie Sockles, my current leadership coach. I also work with an amazing man named Tim, who we worked together all last year through the pandemic and scaling the business. And Tim Porthouse is incredible, absolutely incredible. So I would say the combination of both of them helping has been monumental.
Fantastic. And we have a question from Jordan. How would you go about finding a mentor that aligns with your values while you're potentially still in college? What are the things that you could look for, and who would you look for to possibly be those mentors?
Look at some of the alumni associations. If you have an alumni portal and there's somebody doing something cool that you're interested in maybe exploring as you graduate, after you graduate, reach out to them and let them know. Just saying, hi, I'm Jordan. I'm a student and I'm graduating at X date. Would love to just get some insights on your career path, where you are right now. Honestly, if there's a college student that reaches out, I seldom say no, because it's such a formative time and I want to make sure I'm giving back and I'm sharing what I can so that they don't have to, jump over the same number of hurdles that I've had to. So most people, especially those in a giving mindset, will be willing to do the same thing.
Well, we appreciate that, because that's exactly what you're doing here today, and that giving mindset and being able to pay it forward to students and share the things that you've been through and the things that you've known and the successes and the experiences and the stories. So we really do appreciate that.
My pleasure.
We also have Bianca, and Bianca asks, what advice do you have for someone who has a variety of talents and interests, but is starting to feel stuck in the planning stages and not the doing stages?
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on how to get that momentum going forward to stop planning and just start doing?
Build the first pyramid first. I get analysis paralysis sometimes, and that's what I have to remind myself is just do the first step. And once you do the first step, then how do we take on the next one? And then what is that other step? And just really give yourself some grace. You're not going to solve everything in a day. You're not going to solve everything in a year, but just think about that first pyramid and building that. And once you have that set, then start looking at your next steps.
I really like that, because I struggle with that too. As a scientist, I love the planning and the analysis, and it does sometimes go down a rabbit hole and prevent you from sometimes making that next movement, because there's so many other things that you can think of as to possibly why it won't work or what will go wrong.
Right. But I do think there is some value in the planning phase of it, right? For me, strategy is so important. We could just come out, into the market doing whatever, but if you don't have a plan in place, you're not going to see the same returns as if you did actually plan it and think about what success looks like. What are your KPIs? How are you tracking it? Who else needs to get involved? Like, those pieces are very, very important. I think once you have those in place and you kind of know what that first pyramid looks like, then it's time to proceed. And just keep in mind that it's not going to be perfect. right? You're going to fall down that pyramid a couple of times, but you'll find your way up there for sure. We do it all the time.
That's also the voice of a resilient entrepreneur that I like hearing. Isha is asking, knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently when you were starting out?
Not apologize for being in rooms with other entrepreneurs just because I didn't feel like I was one yet.
When did you get that first feeling that you were an entrepreneur?
Oh, you know what? MIT's Global Entrepreneurship Bootcamp. Out of like thousands that applied, I was like one of, I think, 70 entrepreneurs around the world that got to go to Seoul, South Korea for a week. And being around so many like-minded people that are just going 1,000 miles an hour, building their businesses and learning from the greatest minds from MIT, including Elaine Chen, was just really incredible and very affirming. And having people like Elaine look at you and say, you can do this and you are going to do this, was just very, very confirming and made me feel like I could do it. And several years later, here we are. So grateful for her for sure.
That's important because I think an awful lot of our students, they don't necessarily see themselves as an entrepreneur because we have an awful lot of stereotypes about what an entrepreneur kind of looks like, or behaves like, or what is classified as entrepreneurship versus, just being industrious and your side gig type situations.
I think being corporate for a long time and being a Black woman in corporate America, right? There is that label of like what you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be. I mean, these are college students, so they may not know the reference of Olivia Pope and Scandal. And I'm perfectly comfortable dating myself, but like that was, what you were supposed to be as a leader. And that's just not necessary sometimes. Like, just tell your boss what you need. Like you don't need to plan and scheme and do all of these pieces. So I think for me, having grown up as a woman in corporate America for as long as I did, I already knew the steps I needed to take to just reject it and be like, no, I'm sorry, we're not falling into this box to make somebody else feel better. Like you can adapt the same way I've had to adapt from birth. Like it's fine.
That's great advice. Brandy is looking and asking, do you have any book recommendations for mentoring and being team leader?
Sure, Brandy. So the first one I actually have right here. It's called Levers. Really good book. Highly recommend it. One of our investors helped write this. And then Amos Schwartzfarb is just like a brilliant, brilliant human. He runs Techstars here in Austin, and it's really, really good book. Lost and Founder is another one that I love. And then there's another one, but I don't think I can actually use the name. So I will share a list with you. And if you decide to share it with your students, feel free. But
I'd be happy to.
The other one I would include is the Four Tendencies. It talks about the way people process information and the best way to communicate with them so that they get the information they need and you have a more symbiotic relationship. That's really helpful. Learning people's personalities versus trying to change them, just changing your communication can go a really long way.
I think we all need that superpower. Could help in everybody's daily life. We have a lot of love that answer. Amen, Janice.
Thank you.
And rah, keep it going. It's fantastic. So thank you for all of this wonderful insight and advice. We've also got a question from Sherry. You mentioned that you wanted both sides of your brain engaged in the entrepreneur/business process. What or where did you find ways to create this for yourself?
Wow. I'm laughing because my first thought was being broke will make you very creative. Quite honestly.
And entrepreneurial.
Yeah, you learn to get entrepreneurial very quickly when you're an entry-level graphic designer in a very expensive city of the DC metro area, and you have to pay rent, gas, parking, and get to work, right? So, when I first started, I was making $35,000, which was doable in Austin, but in DC, that's like 4 roommates. Like it was not where we are now is what I would say. So for me, Sherry, your question on like both sides of the brain and where did I find ways to create this? It was out of necessity because I recognized as a graphic designer, I loved it. I was very good at it, still am. But I also knew that in the business world and being corporate, which was my sweet spot, I knew I wanted to stay in corporate America at that time. I needed to elevate my own professional reputation and standing and brand with those that controlled promotions and upward mobility. And the best way to do that was to stand out from my peers by being able to say, hey, Vice President of Business Development, I know that you wanted your slide deck to look like this, and I did it, but here's a backup version that I think tells the same story, but just looks better, and like, here's why I think it looks better. Just let me know what you think, you decide if you want to take it. But being able to show that I really understood the business side is when I started seeing greater returns. And through, studying entrepreneurship and strategic management and getting my PMP certification in program management, I more than doubled my salary in 5 years. So I went from 35,000 to 6 figures. Youngest manager in the history of the marketing and sales division that I was on at PwC, which is one of the largest companies in the world, because I made sure to use that. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that it came out of necessity and being tired of eating canned tuna and frozen broccoli every single day, because that's what you could afford as an entry-level graphic designer at that time.
Your answer also goes back to something that we try to get students to recognize, that you don't just starting your own business isn't the only way to be an entrepreneur. There's an awful lot of entrepreneurial activities that you can do in the corporate world, and just taking and looking at those problems or gaps and being able to solve them in a very unique way with, is being an intrapreneur, if you will, but you can be that in many different business settings. It's not just in starting your own business.
And it's not just in corporate, right? I can only speak from my experience, but even now as a business owner and having, the most incredible team in the market, have to say that, best team in the world. One of our business analysts, Jed, he came to us as an intern this summer from one of our investors, and he's always coming in with he has that entrepreneurial mindset. It's mind-boggling watching the gift that he's bringing to the team. Hey, Esmeralda, I think you're not on mute.
I was trying to figure out who that actually was. If everybody could possibly mute themselves, that would be great.
No worries. I mean, it happens.
Sorry about that. It's Zoom. It happens. We're used to it now after,
exactly. Life is meant to be lived, right? So, what was I saying? But Jed, our intern, now business analyst, he got that promotion because he was entrepreneurial and saying, okay, Janice, you're asking me to do this task. I found a tool that'll help us automate it. And here's the price. So I sent the invoice to accounting. Let me know if you like it. I can do this in 3 days versus 2 weeks if we implement this tool. And now I have time to work on this idea that I know you said was a good one. So can I take this and run with it? What are your thoughts? And I love that. Love that. Our head of product does the same thing with, like our timeline for our product roadmap, always thinking about ways to make sure that we're being profitable and continuing to expand the company. Or, Joseph Kopser, my chief growth officer, he's a serial entrepreneur. He sold his rideshare app to Mercedes in 2013. And, he brings that mindset to the team every day. And it's incredible. So all of that is to say, if you choose to intern over the summer for a startup, there are a lot of spaces for you to continue expanding your entrepreneurship acumen. It's a great way to learn on the ground floor on a small team, especially. And there's more than one way to get that experience. Corporate America was just my pathway, but it doesn't have to be yours.
Fantastic. And along those lines, Jordan was asking if you think it's necessary to get some experience and skills from a business or corporate role before tackling being an entrepreneur. What are your...
I don't think so. I mean, it really just depends on the business and what you're doing, right? I mean, if you're Yeah, it really depends. I mean, Zuckerberg didn't have extensive corporate experience when he built Facebook. So I think there's more than one way to build a company. There's more than one definition of a founder. So it really just depends on where you are and the company you're building.
Thank you so much. And we have one last question that I will go ahead and ask, and then we'll wrap it up because I know you have a hard stop at noon.
Yes.
How have you, actually, we'll stop on this last one from Kushal. What is your vision for the mentor method? And look going out, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, the mentor method will become the leading cultural change management platform. Hard stop.
Hard
Making
stop.
sure that, the world is a little bit easier for underrepresented professionals to get that advancement, and make sure that, our allies in making workplaces more equitable understand their responsibilities, understand that, we're not taking anything away from them. In fact, it helps lift all boats. That's really our core focus. So we're just going to continue expanding and continue being the best company we can possibly be.
I love that, and I can't think of a better way to thank you and end on that note, and let you know how much we genuinely appreciate you being here and for sharing, your insights, your experiences, and all of the advice that you did with us today. We really truly appreciate it, and I know our students value it tremendously and get an awful lot out of it, and love being able to hear from different perspectives and sides to everything.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. You're doing amazing work, and I'm available if you need help with anything.
I appreciate that. And before we close out, I would also like to thank all of the women entrepreneurship organizers, which includes Dr. Jennifer Irvin, Dr. Jana Minifee, Dr. Gloria Martinez Ramos, and Dr. Claudia Rauschman. We appreciate your efforts in organizing this event and all of women entrepreneurship focused things. And I will also say thank you to all of our viewers for being with us here today. Please connect with us on Twitter and LinkedIn at TXState or TXSTCIE, or you can check out our website. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you for being here with us.